Hello and good morning. Happy Turkey Day to anyone celebrating. I hope you're all ready to fatten up a bit with me. However, if you are like me, that will involve absolutely zero turkey. Ready for my one and only hot take? 99% of Thanksgiving food is trash. Turkey, dry, cranberries. Literally any other berry would be better. Green beans, still traumatizing. Stuffing is just hot bread. Potatoes, what are we, British? I do enjoy gravy, though. Seriously, I looked up a few other holiday dishes from around the world, and we are getting crushed, people. Let me just cite a couple examples, and maybe you'll agree with me. Iceland has this dry-aged and smoked lamb dish served with a creamy bechamel sauce, which I don't even know what that is, but I know it's fatty and delicious. France has a massive, Yule log cake that resembles a Swiss roll, only 1,000 times bigger. Japan has been celebrating Christmas by simply devouring KFC for almost 50 years. Come on, we can do better. If you still want your boring potatoes, at least turn them into latkes or a cheesy potato casserole or hot dish, I don't know. I'm Midwestern. Everything's a hot dish there. All I'm saying is, I think a little revamping is due. That's all. Sorry for the rant about Thanksgiving food on Thanksgiving. I'll move on. Today, I bring you the Berrima Axe Murderer. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources for today come from Wikipedia, a New York Post article by Melissa Koenig, Murderpedia, and a Headstuff article written by Syrian Conliffe. Berrima is a small village in South New Wales, Australia, just outside of Sydney. Today's population is roughly 1,500, and way back in the early to mid-1800s where our story takes place, it was about 5 times smaller, like 300 people. A close-knit community where everyone knows each other and actually cares for the town itself. In fact, a couple years ago, it was listed as Australia's best preserved village from the 1830s. That seems very specific, but I guess it's cool. And as idyllic as this sounds, danger is never far away. On February 19th, 1941, a man by the name of Hugh was on his way from Berrima to Sydney when he noticed a wild dingo pawing at something alongside the road. Upon closer inspection, he realized the object was a human body. Hugh notified the authorities, shooed the dingo away, and later the man was identified as Kearns Landrigan. I apologize if I struggle with a few of these names. He was last seen with a man named Dunlevy 2 nights earlier. According to police reports, Kearns was found lying on his back, a smile still stretched across his rigid face. The back of his skull had been beaten to mush by a heavy object, clearly leading to his death. Leading to and away from this body was a wagon cart track. Many people used smaller carts to haul things back then, but these tracks were different. It was clear that one of the wheels was broken, leading to a weird pattern on the ground. Investigators follow this path, and it leads them to the home of John Dunlevy. John was a newcomer in town, and he had recently bought this property he was on from the Mulligan family after they had left town in a hurry a little while back. John happened to be home at this time, and when police approached him, clear bloodstains covered his shirt. On top of that, he was also wearing Mr. Kearns' hat, and boots. Straight to jail. Police took John into custody where, somehow, he maintained his innocence, despite the mountain of evidence against him and found on him. It was quickly found out that John Dunlevy was in fact not John Dunleavy. His real identity was that of John Lynch, a former convict laborer from a few towns away. This was not the first time he had been a suspect in a murder case either. 6 years ago, in August of 1836, a man by the name of George Barton was held up and killed by a gang of masked men. It was assumed that these masked men worked on a farm named Oldbury, run by this George. George was known to be a cruel man and was later convicted of manslaughter himself. So police believed this was an employee-employer dispute staged as a robbery, but could not prove it. Anyway, things were not looking good for John Lynch, and he was sent to trial shortly. Soon, he was sentenced to death for the murder of Kearns, and his execution was scheduled for April 22nd. For almost 2 months, he would continue to claim his innocence until the day right before his death. On April 21st, he decided to confess everything to the prison priest. And what he confessed would blow the minds of everyone in the small village of Berrima. But first, who is John Lynch? Not a whole lot is known about this guy. For starters, he was born in Cavan, Ireland in 1813. He is the definition of his father's son. Quote, Lynch's older brother Patrick was tried and convicted at Cavan, Ireland in July of 1831 for sheep stealing and sentenced to transportation for life. He was transported to Sydney aboard the Captain Cook, arriving in April of 1832. John Lynch and his father Owen were both tried and convicted in Ireland in October of 1831. John, aged 19, was convicted of obtaining goods under false pretenses, for which he received a life sentence of transportation. And his father, a widower who was 55, he was convicted and received a transportation sentence of 7 years. Lynch and his father were transported to the colony of New South Wales. Upon their arrival, John Lynch was assigned to James Atkinson at Oldbury Farm in the Bong Bong district near Berrima. The Bong Bong district. And his father Owen was assigned to somewhere in Sydney. End quote. So, I mean, if you didn't piece that together, which I actually had to do myself because I had never heard that before, but they were sentenced to transportation for life or for 7 years. So I believe it's just banishment. And he worked as a convict laborer, so they must have agreements with other countries or other towns back in the time to send these inmates or prisoners. Which, I mean, that's not the worst, but you could just lock them up. Anyway, like I said, all 3 men in their family were essentially banished from Ireland to Australia. I would take that any day over a South Dakota jail cell. And that's how Mr. Lynch got to Sydney and started his life of crime. Okay, back to current day 1842. Lynch has been arrested and has started to confess everything. Remember the Mulligan family that Lynch allegedly bought his property from? Well, it didn't exactly happen that way. Lynch knew the Mulligans from his previous life. Well, I wouldn't say previous life. He'd gotten to know them over the years in and around Sydney, Australia, and Barrymore, and he had come to collect a debt from the father of the Mulligan family in 1841. When this interaction didn't go well, and he was essentially shut down, he stormed off in the direction of Sydney. Eventually, he reached a place called Razorback Range to camp for the night. And then he met these 2 other travelers, a man named Edmund Ireland, ironic, and his, quote, helper, a little unnamed boy. For some reason, that night, Lynch then changed tactics. According to his confession, instead of leaving, he now, quote, began to form the plan of destroying men, end quote. Fun. That morning, it's just out of the blue, it seems like. That morning, while Edmund and his helper slept in, John Lynch took action. First, he killed a young boy with a tomahawk blow to the head, and then proceeded to bash Edmund's head in with the same axe. Lynch, after some cool down time here, started his journey back towards Berrima on a revenge mission against this Mulligan man. And during this leg of the trip, he ran into the Williams, a father and son duo. Now, these two men were genuinely good people, and I truly think it might be the saddest part of the story, but John Lynch was paranoid about this last attack, and he couldn't help but think that these two men knew something. So his anxiety is just getting the best of him, essentially. The next day, he asked the son to come help him forage for a bit looking for food. Once alone, John took the tomahawk and struck the son in the back of the head, killing him instantly. Lynch returned to their campsite and told the father his kid was still out there poking around. And when the father's back was turned, he received the same tomahawk strike to his head. John then proceeded to bury the bodies deep in the bush. The following day, he returned to the Mulligan's family home. This time, with a nicer proposition, realizing greed would not get him anywhere. The Mulligan family was comprised of Father John Mulligan, another John, his wife Bridget, and their two kids, John Jr. and Mary, who were 18 and 13 respectively. Lynch told Mr. Mulligan that he would cut a bunch of wood for the family out back if John Jr. promised to wheel it back inside. He agreed, and they went about their day. Once finished with the wood, Lynch called for John Jr., and once alone with him, caved his head in with the axe and threw some brush on top of the body. Lynch returned to the Mulligans' home with another dumb excuse about where their son was, which worked for about an hour, but soon Bridget grew worried and asked her husband to grab his rifle and go and check. Lynch knew that he was about to be found out and needed to act fast. Quote, as Mulligan was walking in the front door of the hut with the gun, Lynch retrieved his axe on the pretense of tying up a dog. In the meantime, Bridget had gone out of the back of the hut towards where the body of her son lay. Realizing there was no time to lose, Lynch got behind the old man and struck him with the axe. He then went to meet the woman who he knew had already found her son's body. As she turned around, Lynch tripped her with her foot, and as she fell, he hit her with the axe, killing her. This part's fucked up, just a warning. He then returned to the hut where the young girl Mary was. Lynch asserted in his confession he did not wish to kill her, but he knew that if he did not, she would hang him. He claimed to give the 13-year-old, quote, 10 minutes to pray for her soul, and then he violated her and murdered her, end quote. Lynch then gathered the bodies of his victims together, piled them up, and burned them. He remarked during his confession, quote, I ain't never seen anything like it. They burned as if they were so many bags of fat. Like he was burning bags of fat. The next morning, he gathered those remains and buried them in another part of the farm and burned most of the remaining clothing that he had found inside of the hut. Also, I call bullshit on the Mary part. You wanted to kill her. You say you didn't, yet you raped her first. I mean, it seemed like quite a pleasurable experience for you, John. So after this quadruple murder, he traveled to Sydney and sent multiple letters under the Mulligan's name to different people saying they had either run away or absconded. Lynch somehow finagled his way into ownership of the farm property itself. I don't know exactly how. It was the 1800s. Houses were like $4. John Lynch went on to hire Terrence and Catherine Barnett as land laborers and housekeepers. So he's over here fully taking over the Mulligan's life at this point, just moving everything in like he had always belonged there. His next and final murder would be that of businessman Kearns Landrigan. And we know what happens then. Police literally followed the murder trail to his house, and he was covered in evidence. That reminds me of when kids are like, It wasn't me. But their entire bodies are covered in the slime that's also covering the walls. Oh, we know it's you, buddy. It's okay. Although he was only convicted of one murder, he confessed to a total of 10 the day before his execution. Authorities were able to corroborate most of these stories as well. And on April 22nd, 1842, John Lynch was executed by hanging. And that, my friends, is the gruesome tale of the Berrima Axe Murderer. Anytime I see axe in the title of an article, I'm hooked immediately. And today was no different. I just hope y'all enjoyed the story as well. Again, I cannot thank you all enough for listening to me. It's truly a pleasure to do this. I'm still surprised at how much I've enjoyed it up until this point and will continue to do so. I just hope you like it as well, at least a little bit. If you stick around, there might be an extra treat at the end, but in the meantime, have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye. Love you. The last episode, if you stuck around, I told an extra story after my first. And while I don't think I'd be able to provide you with 2 stories every episode twice a week, I think I can still give you a little something extra. Because why not? Maybe I'll cover something recent like I will today, or maybe an update from an older crime, or maybe just something fun that I learned along the way. Who knows? Regrettably, I first saw this story on Snapchat yesterday, but came across it again today while doing some writing. It's the definition of bonkers. I'm just going to read you this quick New York Post article by Melissa. It's fast read, super fun, well, not super fun, kind of wild. Here we go. Quote, a 17-year-old girl in Ohio fatally bludgeoned her older boyfriend's mother with a rock after giving him a 5-hour ultimatum to kill her himself. Caitlin Coons of Cleveland is being tried as an adult on murder charges in the death of Nicole Jones, 53, with prosecutors saying the teenager beat Jones to death in April, just days after she left her foster home to be with her boyfriend, Jonathan Jones, 33. Coons had allegedly given Jones, who was previously convicted over his illegal relationship with the underage girl, a 5-hour window to kill his mom, who disapproved of their relationship. Detective Jake Albright of the Sylvania Township Police Department said in court on Friday, Caitlin had told Jonathan that they needed to do something about his mother because she was preventing them from being together, not the law. And she gave him 5 hours to do something about her. When those 5 hours passed, and Jonathan had still had not taken action, Coons took matters into her own hands. She went outside, retrieved a rock, and when Nicole Jones was standing in front of the refrigerator in the kitchen, unaware of Caitlin's presence, she bludgeoned Nicole Jones a number of times and then strangled her. Jonathan was reportedly sitting in the living room at the time and allegedly helped his young girlfriend cover up the murder. The pair headed to 2 local stores in Jones's vehicle, purchased a tarp and trash bags to wrap the body and clean the kitchen. The twisted duo then placed the body in Jonathan's car, which they drove to a nearby apartment complex, and tossed the body into a dumpster that was ultimately taken to a landfill. Police say it is unlikely Nicole's body will ever be found. After disposing of the body, the 2 suspects are said to have driven across the southern border into Mexico. Authorities were only made aware of the alleged crime the next month when Canton police contacted Sylvania police to conduct a welfare check on Nicole. Police then began investigating Nicole's disappearance and were able to track Coons and Jones to a small town in Mexico. Because Jones never disarmed the ankle monitor he was wearing after previously pleading guilty to child endangerment. This guy is literally the dumbest criminal. He kept his ankle monitor on after assisting in friggin' murder. Come on, dude. Caitlin Coons has been charged with murder, aggravated murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. Her lawyer, Anne, has argued that the teen was a victim of Jonathan, who was not supposed to have any contact with her after his previous charges for their relationship. End quote. Holy cow. Very excited to see how that plays out in court. Crazy. I mean, first of all, her lawyer Anne has a point. She was underage, but it kind of seems like Caitlin, the 17-year-old, was pulling all the strings. She's like, murder your mother. If you don't, I'm going to do it. He's like, what the fuck? Okay, I'll run to Mexico with you. Oh, all right. That's all. Thanks again. I appreciate it. Next week, we're going to kick off the holiday season with a Christmas family massacre. How fun. Okay, now I'm leaving for real. Promise. Bye. Love you.